Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And for about a year now, I actually switched to the iPhone, and part of that was because I started noticing that Samsung wasn't really providing everything I needed. Actually, the last Samsung phone that I used was the Note 20 Ultra, the Mystic Bronze, which I think it's still such a beautiful device. I'd like to go through some details of what made me switch. Now, this is not to say Samsung is a bad company or anything like that. Please do keep in mind that this is not a video about why you should switch from Apple to Samsung or Samsung to Apple. This is just me giving my experience as to why I switched. I have encountered so many problems when it comes to Samsung devices. I have always noticed that things don't run smoothly. So the Note 20 Ultra has this 120 Hz feature on the display. However, it is very laggy sometimes. That actually has to do a lot with the chipset, and it has to do with the thermals inside the device. But it just goes to show that sometimes it's not worth it to say your device has the latest specifications, when in reality you can only run them like 60% of the time, because the other 40% of the time the device is having to deal with heat and bugs in the software. So it doesn't really take advantage of all that power that's there theoretically. So for point number 2, I'd like to discuss the Apple ecosystem compared to the Samsung ecosystem. Now, I have always used a smartwatch with a Samsung phone, just because it makes everything easier. However, I noticed that iPhones and with the Apple Watch are so well integrated. It's kind of ridiculous when you think about it. Everything's so well integrated that there's some form of that available in the Apple Watch, which means you don't have to go to your phone to check your notifications. Now, that's great for one major reason. That's what the Apple Watch is for. It might seem obvious, but chances are no Samsung watch out there can come close to that. It's meant to facilitate and give you quick heads up. And same thing when it comes to the iPhone and the iPad and the iPads and the MacBooks or the iMac. Say you copy a link, you can actually paste it across all the other Apple devices. Universal Display, for example, it's astonishing that you just put, say, your iPad next to your MacBook, drag that mouse cursor to the edge of the display, and it automatically goes to the next screen. It's ridiculous just how flawless it works. So these tiny things just make it so much more enjoyable to be on the Apple ecosystem, because it saves you time. For point number 3, I'd like to talk about unoptimized apps on Samsung devices. This is something that actually really bothered me all throughout the time that I used Samsung devices. You might remember that back in the days, it would use the screen instead of the camera. So Snapchat would take the screen of your phone, but not use the camera itself. So you had a phone with an amazing camera that never got used by apps. What is that? You wouldn't actually take advantage of something that's built into your phone. For point number 4, this is kind of like a really picky one. The Samsung smartwatch. I actually think they are some of the worst smartwatches out there. In fact, there's one thing that really bothers me about Samsung. That's that they recycle a lot of the chipsets on their smartwatches. So you might think you would be better off getting the latest smartwatch, when in reality, the last smartwatch has the exact same chipset, and for whatever reason, Samsung decides that some features cannot work on that watch, but they can on the new one, when the chipset is the exact same thing. I encountered so many bugs when it comes to the Samsung smartwatch. The heart rate would stop for some reason, so I would actually go for like an hour and a half on a walk dead somehow. The GPS was way off most of the time. I'll also just like to quickly mention that you cannot get past the setup of the Apple Watch unless you have an iPhone. So RIP to anyone who buys a smartwatch from Apple thinking that he's an Android with it. Now for point number 5, I would summarize it in a single word: EXYNOS. Now for point number 6, security and privacy. iPhones make it really obvious. They avoid tracking as much as possible, and if there is some form of tracking, usually you can opt out of it. Samsung, what don't they actually take from you? They give the impression they are really private. Sure, you might deny an app, say the ability to have access to the camera when it shouldn't, or access to the camera in general, but that doesn't stop them from tracking you. So iPhones make it really obvious. Most of the time when you launch an app, you get the option to allow the app to track you or to not track you. It's that simple. For the next point, I'd like to discuss battery life. And Samsung devices have improved a lot on this. However, nothing matches the iPhone at the moment. It's so well optimized. Its standby battery consumption is just top notch. 1 or 2% after like 10 hours of not being used. For some reason, my Note 20 Ultra, it will drop like 10% overnight in like 5 hours, and I have no idea where that will actually come from. When I actually went to check the battery settings, see what was actually consuming that battery life, I couldn't point out to one thing. So I just assume, it's just poor battery management. Lastly, I like to discuss two things that I always hated about Samsung phones: the Galaxy Store and those stupid ads they would put in the apps. You're like, why is there a Galaxy Store in the first place? It's weird, it's ugly. It's every time you go in there, an ad pops up and you have to click on do not show again. But what that does is display another different ad. It doesn't actually stop the pop-up from popping up. And ads in the apps, remember when they introduced ads into the health app, like the Samsung Health app? Ridiculous. The outrage was immediate, so Samsung took it down. But it just goes to show, like, how much do these companies care about you as an individual before that we care about you turns into just another marketing strategy. Now, I know every company does this. However, Apple is the only one that I can point out that actually genuinely cares and keeps to its promises with its customers, something that Samsung lacks. So there you go, guys. Those are some few things that actually made me switch to the iPhone ecosystem. Now, it doesn't mean that Samsung is a bad company or like they make bad phones by any means. In fact, probably the display on my iPhone was made by Samsung, probably. So, it's taste, it's preference, but I had to experience the Apple ecosystem at one point, and I'm glad I switched. It doesn't mean I'm not going back to Samsung. In fact, I'm still considering getting a Samsung phone at some point, especially the Z Fold. Oh, that's just, gorgeous. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. It was just constructive criticism. The video is not designed to make you decide whether you should, switch ecosystems or not. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.